In every field office, agents that work domestic terrorism are on the JTTF, but the domestic terrorism program is not, I repeat, not part of the national security program. It is not funded by the NIP, the National Intelligence Program. Funding is not NIP. Well, here you go. Here's the solution. As the CT threat wanes down, they're facing the prospect of losing their funding for the CT mission. Well, you hire up all of these CT agents, that threat starts going away, but those people don't start going away. They're continuing to work on JTTFs, but they become gradually more and more, say, unemployed because the threat has been waning.
All interviewers have their own style, and my style is to try to get to the point and to be intensely curious. And the key to interviewing is listening.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Today's Sunday Sit Down, take number, I think we're up to 5. This is Bill Taylor. He is a retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent. He was an FBI whistleblower, and I wanted to have him come tell his story here with an FBI guy because I think we share some commonality and understanding. Bill, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me and the invite. I appreciate this. This is great. This is really great.
Thanks for the patience, too. We've been doing this for about 35 minutes, folks, trying to get this thing to run, but I think we've got all the demons exercised out. Will you tell people where you grew up, maybe some of your backstory, your professional history, and what made you, want to become, and how did you become an FBI agent?
Yeah, it's great. I grew up a little bit here, a little bit everywhere. I kind of started out in the Northeast. I moved down to Florida when I was a teenager, spent a lot of time down there, and then ended up going to college at University of Texas in Austin, where I think you are, and loved it there back in the 90s. Stayed there for the next 13 years until I became an agent in 2003. Before being an agent, I was a teacher. I taught public school. I just had a real sort of passion for public service and trying to give back and help. And, after doing that for about 7 years, I had the calling to try to take it to another level. And I'd always had some law enforcement in my family and an interest in it. So I put my name in the hat for the FBI. Actually, it was before 9/11. It was in January of 2001 when I put my name in the hat. I didn't hear anything back whatsoever. I mean, I was a teacher. I didn't really expect to. 9/11 happens, and then suddenly they're rooting around through the bottom of the desk drawers to find any application. And I think mine showed up then because I still remember it. December 18th of 2001, I got a package in the mail from DOJ, and I'm like, what the heck is this? Am I in trouble or something here? And I open it, and I'm like, astounded. It's like, hey, would you come and interview, do the phase 1 testing and all that kind of stuff. So I did, and I passed. And I just feel like I was the perpetual alternate candidate. It took me 3 years to onboard into the FBI. So my onboarding was in October of 2003, and I retired in October of 2023 after 20 years. And again, just something that I'd always wanted to do, and I'm thankful I had the opportunity to do. I started out at the Newark field office of the FBI. It was number 7, I think, on my list. You put numbers on them, right? It was number 7. I think they saw anybody who put it above number 50, and they're like, oh, that guy's going there. And so that was me. I was going there, and spent about 7 years working at the Newark field office. About 7 years. As initially assigned to the OCDEF stuff, so the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, which was great work. I mean, I loved it. We worked international cartel. Colombia was mostly our thing. We did drug buys in Colombia. We laundered money with undercover operations. It was some really cool and fun work. I really enjoyed it. But I'd always had sort of a desire. Maybe I'd watched too many spy movies or something, or grew up too much during the Cold War, but I always liked national security. And so I asked, for permission, like, hey, can I go over and work some national security, some CI stuff? And of course, everybody in the drug squad's like, what the hell is the matter with you? Are you stupid? I mean, Seriously? I took, a beating, which I understand, but I always wanted to work it. And, they come to you and they're like, okay, well, you got this big case. You just give me another year, give me another 2 years, and we'll help you get there and do a good job and we'll get you there. Well, like another year comes, nothing. Another 2 years comes, nothing. Oh, you still, but eventually they made good on their promise, and I got to go over and work some CI stuff on the squad there. And that was good experience too. But I had no family in Newark, New Jersey, nothing. And, trying to raise a new family. And so the only ticket out was to go to headquarters. And, at that time you had two paths, right? You could either do a TDY, a temporary duty assignment, and come back 18 months later, or go permanent. Well, I had no family. I mean, as much as I liked the work in Newark, I didn't want to go back to New Jersey. And so I opted for the permanent transfer.
We gotta let people know kind of inside bureau language.
Yeah.
When someone says, the work is good, it means the office is terrible. And the only thing that's keeping you interested is that you have a lot of scumbags to go after. Is that fair?
Bingo, man. So that's obviously one of the bureau euphemisms. The office has great work. That means it's a disaster of a place to be.
That's right.
I mean, you come in as a GS10, which is, I was one of the few people, let's put it this way, of 50 people in my class, I think I was literally the only person that got a raise. And that's only because I was a public school teacher in Texas. You were one of those guys too?
Yeah,
I was a public school teacher. After teaching 7 years, my salary was $32,000. So, Texas didn't pay anything back then to teachers. And so I was one of the only people who got a raise. But you can't raise a family and live in Newark, New Jersey, just outside of New York, on a GS10 step 1 salary. It's just not possible.
Sure.
It's very difficult. Let's put it that way. And so after putting in my time there, I had to get out. I had to do something different. The commute is an hour plus each way. And we spent extra money to not live in Pennsylvania, which a lot of the people did. So it was time to get out, and headquarters was my ticket out.
That's a terrible ticket that you have to buy. But
it was.
Let me also hone in on a couple of things. You mentioned this in one of our earlier takes as we were trying to get this through. What age were you going through the academy, and what kind of backgrounds did you see? If you took a pay cut, or you took a raise and everyone else took a pay cut, what were the backgrounds of the folks that you entered with?
I was 34, so I was a little bit older than the average, which is said to be about 30 just on average. So I was a little bit older. I think the maximum age at that time you could come in is 37. Otherwise, you'd age out. The guy literally sitting next to me was a rocket scientist, literally. He worked for NASA, was a mathematician. We had attorneys. We had all kinds of crazy professional people, of course, military people. Kind of weird. So this is 2003. Our class at that time, I believe, was known as the class with the most females ever at that point. We had about 30% females in our class. It's just not historically a female-dominated profession, but that was sort of maybe the beginning of trying to change that. Yeah,
I don't envy that class.
Yeah, it was interesting. I could tell you a lot of stories, but
let me hone in on that for 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Were there instances, no names needed, were there instances of marital infidelity with females in your class that you're aware of?
Infidelity, not that I'm aware of. There were some relationships that were formed.
Sure.
I don't think that they were married though.
Okay. And did any marriages fall apart while
not that I'm aware of.
Male or female colleagues?
No, not that I'm aware of. Not from my class, but there was a rather notorious class counselor there at the same time. It wasn't our class counselor, who had apparently lots of problems with having affairs with his students going through there.
I just point that out because everybody thinks you're going to get these paradigms of virtue, and you're going to get rocket scientists and CIA case officers and all that. And the reality of it is, we had Jim Comey run through when my class was there, and he came up and talked about the show Quantico was just coming out.
Oh boy, oh my God.
And he was like, that's just what it's like. We all hang out in our towels and talk. And I was like, yeah, that's funny because it's not real. And then I went every single female minus maybe one of them was having a relationship with a student or a counselor there. And 3 marriages fell apart from my class. And one of the gals that was in my class ended up mothering a baby from one of my classmates when she was married to another agent, and like just all of the worst things. I think it probably got worse over time, but it's interesting. 30%.
Yeah.
There's certainly you had the seeds of it back then. Then
Oh,
at least.
for sure. And there was definitely some qualified women in the class. There's no doubt about it.
Mhm.
Most of our class, if you make it to the academy, I don't know what the exact numbers, but it's up over 95% graduate at one point. Like we had recycles for injuries, but we only had one person out of roughly 50 that failed out of the academy, just one person. And they gave her a position in surveillance
Sure.
to help her out. But yeah, so all but one of us ultimately became agents.
Did you know that when you went to the academy, while you were at the academy? Did you know the fail rate was less than 5%?
No, I didn't. I was, I don't know. I kind of straight laced, and I just feared that, I was going to be that one guy who, so I was always very motivated to, keep a low profile, keep my head down, and just do whatever I could to get through it. My way of, it's always been during life, is just don't draw attention to yourself. Try not to, which is completely not what I did when I became a whistleblower, right? Yeah, I ended up
that's
a lot of attention to myself against my better senses and judgment. But but it was good to get out of the academy. It wasn't the best training. It was just a lot of administrative stuff. Yeah.
And I think that's also worth people hearing, because everybody, you see these shows that glamorize it and they act like it's boot camp and it's grad school and it's the toughest thing ever. You were years after the Silence of the Lambs, but did people still have that sort of attitude that that's what they were getting into? And the Hollywood version? For sure.
There was definitely people that were there for the wrong reasons that you could tell, or you could sense. And, nothing individually was hard. It was, if anything was difficult, it was the collected, you've got the studying, you've got the physical, you've got the tactics, and of course the firearms, and any one of those things could wash you out and send you home. And, it's, I guess part of it is just, it's the high stakes. You quit your job, you jettisoned your job, and you may or may not be able to go back to it if you fail out. So it's just high stakes, I guess, if you do not succeed.
Sure.
But they found ways to get most people through.
That's the other thing.
They found ways, to get people not through if they didn't like them too. We saw that in a couple other classes that were going through at the same time. And they would have these meetings, like all the instructors, they called it the pig or whatever, where they would have like these informal boards to people who didn't exhibit the right characteristics. They would find ways to get them out. They would deem them unsuitable.
Yes, the suitability crisis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Were there any other former school teachers that were in your class that you recall?
No, I don't think so. And I only met a couple in the bureau. I think it's kind of funny. Like I processed through San Antonio, the same office I think you processed through. And I think that maybe the only reason I even got that first phone call, that first letter in the mail, was because the applicant coordinator was a former teacher.
Oh, how interesting.
And I just speculate, and she saw that I was a teacher and, had, succeeded at what I had done through life, and maybe, I don't know, took pity on a fellow teacher. I don't know. But
that's we can't rule it out. And, it's one of those little coincidences we'll play with. One last little thought on that. You said you were 34. The average age we know is probably late 20s or like right at 30. Were you the oldest member of your class, or were you close to it?
No, I was probably the upper quartile of the class in age, but I think there was one guy that was like a couple of weeks away from his 37th birthday when he graduated, type of thing. So but by and large, the average age I think in our class was right around 30 to 31. And I was, probably in the upper 10 people in terms of age. Yeah.
All right. So Newark, it's got good work, but nobody wants to be there. You're working drugs for what, almost 8 years, it sounded like.
5-6 years roughly. Yeah.
And then CI after that?
And then CI. Yep. The CI
in Newark.
In Newark. That's right. For about 2 years.
Okay. And you punched the ticket. And what kind of work did you go to in headquarters? And what was the headquarters experience? That's a different animal once you step in.
It's a way different animal, and it's not for everybody. It's probably not for most people. I took a job, an SSA job at headquarters in the Iran unit. I worked a subset of counterintelligence called counterproliferation, like preventing people from getting, parts and components for their WMD programs and whatnot. And Iran was a big thing back then. And I was fortunate enough, I say fortunate enough, I wanted it, fortunate enough to get that position in the Iran unit. And, at the time, it covered all Iran CI. So your intel officer type stuff, and as well as like this counterproliferation thing. And in fact, like nobody really knew or liked counterproliferation. They didn't know what it was. It's kind of like the most criminal aspect of CI work of any. And so like I took to it because I was a drug guy. And so like when people on my squad in Newark were, having to go over to like the U.S. Attorney's office, they were sometimes like, I've never talked to a U.S. Attorney's office before. I don't know what to do. I'm like, I'll do it. I've done it before. It's cool, So when I got to headquarters in the Iran unit, they said, "Oh, you work counterproliferation?" They're like, "Oh, you can have all those cases." They didn't want to have anything to do with it. I was like, "Fine." So it was me and one other SSA at headquarters in the Iran unit that program manage. That's what they do. Program manage. They don't actually work cases, but program manage the entire country's Iran counterproliferation program. And I loved it. I thought it was great. And I got a chance to work a lot with some of the other agencies like CIA. We partner and work very closely with them. And from doing that, we have details over there. And so I raised my hand and said, "Hey, I'd like to go be a detailee over at CIA, working the same kind of stuff." And I was fortunate enough to get selected to go over to the agency for a couple of years to be a detailee, working basically the exact same stuff, except not just Iran, Syria, North Korea, primarily Iran, but still there's others. And this was at the time that the JCPOA was being undertaken, and it was just a very tumultuous time in the Iran program, which actually was the source of my very first protected disclosure in 2015.
Yep.
So after spending a couple of years at CIA doing some really, really good stuff, some really cool stuff, I often consider that sort of the high watermark of my career. I mean, you felt like you were actually,
being detailed over to the agency.
Yeah, at least particularly in the capacity I was in. Sometimes detailees turn out to be pencil pushers, depending on what position. The position I was in as a detailee was probably the most operationally oriented position that our detailees had. And so I just got to do some fantastic operational type things that I wish I could talk about.
I'm watching you talk, watching you dance around what you can say.
My filter is going off in my head. Like I can't say or whatever, but it was just a great sense of professional satisfaction. Like anything you would see related to Iran in the news during those years. I mean, we were working it like every day. It was stuff that you would see on the news almost on a daily basis whenever Iran came up. And, we focused on interdicting things. And so, we worked a lot with other intelligence services all around the world. I was surprised how much and how free we worked with other intelligence agencies around the world. We worked with other nations closer than we worked with some other U.S. government partners. And so that was just fascinating. And when I finished with my detail there, I came back and was promoted and basically came back as a unit chief in our counterproliferation section. And so I was the chief then of FBI's Iran counterproliferation program for the next 4.5, 5 years until I left headquarters.
I want to dig into the granularity of it because I think a lot of people don't have an idea of what why CI is not considered to be very fun counterintelligence.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Generally, no arrests. Would you agree?
Generally, that's correct.
A lot of sort of information-based gathering of intel and mapping out networks or mapping out who's talking to who, but a lot of it's not criminal activity.
100% right.
But the overlap that you had doing drugs and OCDF type cases and counterproliferation, it makes sense to me. I'd never thought about it before, but we're talking about you're setting up probably controlled buys of controlled products like ITAR products.
Yeah, absolutely.
Restricted items. Yep. You want to kind of talk about sort of why that background sets you up perfectly to do something that most people, if you said you want to go do counterproliferation and you worked in the FBI, they'd rather like put a pencil into their nose.
No doubt about it. Absolutely. Yeah. And it was this weird hybrid that I'd sort of found as a niche because, there's that that group of people that want to put on their cloak and dagger spy versus spy thing and go chase like an IO from, whatever, Russia for 3 years and do nothing. And then, maybe go interview him on his way out. There's a unique personality that can do that. That wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do. And because I was set up with this background in criminal stuff, which I got to tell you, like at the time, our office mandated everybody work criminal for 2 years before you even consider going to work anything national security. And I didn't like that policy at the time because I wanted to work national security. I'm like, oh, come on, man, I can do it. But I'm telling you, that was the smartest thing and the right thing to do because it set me up for being able to do like CI and counterproliferation work so much better because I had that background in the criminal realm and I was able to understand prosecutions. I was able to talk to U.S. attorneys' offices, and it made all the difference in the world for going over to work CI. And then I just gravitated towards the CP stuff because I had that unique experience and could turn CI cases into criminal cases and were able to sort of impact national security using sort of these traditional criminal tools because there are a lot of legal tools that prohibit this export of goods to other countries. It's a very convoluted web of laws, but it was very effective to do, and I enjoyed doing it, and I found my home there, I guess. Yeah.
The way it was explained to me in the academy is that there's this thing that we go after, and it's called contraband, and that's the government's property, and so that's what drugs are, and illegal guns or whatever else. But being able to work counterproliferation, it's the same sort of mechanism. You're just going up against, instead of street level gangs or cartels, you're doing nation state actors and whoever's working on their behalf. Is that?
Oh, it's so true. It's especially coming from a background of working like cartel drugs. Like one of our main techniques that we implemented, we ran undercover operations to launder cartel money, and that's how we made our drug cases. So we had a Group 1 undercover operation where so the cartels would send cocaine. That was sort of a big thing back at that time.
Sure,
would send cocaine into the U.S., but their big problem was, okay, well, that's great. We have 10 keys or 100 keys in New York. How do we get the money back to Colombia? That's where we came in with our undercover operation. We had an undercover operation where we would physically go out into the street, meet money brokers, pick up the drug money that, they would sell the drugs, they would collect. We would pick up $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 at a time in a parking lot in a mall. And with the understanding that we have a business. And then as part of the undercover, we would physically take the cash back. We'd count it, deposit it to our covert bank account, and then we'd wait for instructions from Colombia, the cartels, on where to wire it to. So that was sort of their trade mechanism. And by doing that, we were able to identify the assets and players in the Colombia side of it, as well as the money brokers and the people distributing the drugs here. So I laundered like several $1 million of cash back to Colombia doing this drug operation. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, because some of the U.S. attorneys are skeptical of prosecuting sometimes, they're like, well, how do we know that this is actually drug money? And so we were doing like these goofy things, like testing the $50 and $100 bills for like the amount of residue cocaine on them and things like that. And we're like, come on, like, of course it's drug money. What do you think this is? You don't just pick up $400,000 in the parking lot of a Macy's or something. And so we're like, fine, well, we'll just go and buy the cocaine ourselves in Colombia. And so that's exactly what we did. In fact, I believe it was the first time the U.S. government ever bought undercover cocaine in Colombia. The Colombian Constitution prohibited that type of undercover activity from.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we went down there right after they changed. I mean, we had an ongoing relationship, but once they changed their constitution, we went down there and talked to their, they call them the Fiscalia, their prosecutors, their head prosecutors, and pitched a plan of our undercovers buying cocaine in Bogota, and they approved it. And so, I went down there and, we used a confidential informant to actually do the transaction that I handled. And we went down there. We bought 6 kilos at a time of cocaine several times. And It's pretty interesting, pretty scary too. And you're buying, high purity cocaine directly from the cartels.
I believe so.
There's a lot of money in it too. Like we were buying cocaine in whatever 2006, $1,000 a kilo, and in Colombia.
Wow.
Yeah, and the cocaine in New York at that time, if my memory is right, is probably about 25 or so a kilo, maybe more. So there's a tremendous profit motive, and then like when you compound on top of that, the cocaine we bought there, the lowest purity cocaine we bought was like 80% pure, and we bought stuff over 95% pure. When you see it in the street, it's way diluted to like, I don't even know, like 5 or 10% purity or something. So there's this huge markup.
Just getting stepped on from dealer to dealer to dealer, and you guys were playing man in the middle.
Yeah. And we, of course, as an undercover, picking up the money, we would take a cut. Like, so our fee was anywhere from 5 to 10%. So if you brought us, say, $400,000 to launder, our fee would be upwards of 10% of that to do it.
But with a 25% or a 25x markup, 1,000% or something, or
easily, right? Yeah,
2,500% markup. I guess you're getting.
Easily
so you
affordable.
They can eat 10%, no problem.
Yeah.
Now, when you're doing the national security stuff, you're dealing with nation state. Obviously, Iran being the focus. Were you doing buy walks? Were you doing control buys and setting up brokers trying to be that same man in the middle and using the same
Yes
tactics?
and no. It was a little bit more complex. In some ways, it was exactly the same. Like these networks, the money laundering, the movement of goods, it's the same thing. It's a widget instead of a kilo. I mean, it really is the same thing. The difference, though, in terms of the undercover was, as a matter of U.S. policy, they were not wanting or willing to let equipment walk. Because these things were going into missiles and nuclear programs and things like that. So it was very difficult at best to get the approval to let something walk. But we were still able to do the network analysis, and one of the and interdictions was one of the big things. And that was a lot of fun in a sense, because we could use FISA, obviously, for targeting those networks overseas. The problem had been we really weren't allowed to use FISA to conduct interdictions of stuff, but we were able to figure out a way to do that. And it was great when you would interdict a shipment, whether it was in the United States or overseas. It was great to see them then argue about what happened.
That was good.
I blanked out for a second. Am I still with you?
You are. Yeah, I saw that too. It looked like the feed was getting interfered with, and then it just disappeared for a second. But I think
okay, cool. So yeah, we were able to interdict things, and then they had no idea where it came from. Like, how did they find out, or where did this go? And they would blame each other and sort of destroy their trusted networks, because then they think each one's a source or a rat. And then we sort of took that same thing. Instead of interdicting physical goods, we started interdicting money and using treasury authorities, which was great too. We were able to, because they have to pay for these things, and so that's usually done by wires, for example.
All of this stuff kind of indicates that the people that were involved in it, they absolutely knew what they were getting involved in. They knew that they were trying to skirt U.S. laws, and they knew that they were trying to provide contraband, let's call it broadly speaking, dual use technologies or military specific to an enemy regime.
100%
accurate.
Yeah, most of the time. Now the U.S. companies, so just to be clear, like the U.S. companies that were selling these things, 99% of the time didn't know that it was going to Iran. For using Iran as the example, Iran would use cutouts in third countries. So the U.S. company, from their perspective, was selling, a widget to, UAE or Malaysia, where they have other customers. So the U.S. company very rarely, willingly or knowingly sent stuff to, say, Iran. We had special access to special intelligence. We knew it was going to Iran. And that's where we were able to sort of slip ourselves in the middle in one fashion or another to disrupt or scuttle the transaction, whether it be with the goods or the money, and then watch them fight about what happened.
Broadly speaking, is that where the CIA, the agency inject is the overseas connections
Yeah,
and
for sure.
some of that's their capability,
Absolutely.
obviously.
And it could be it could be at a lot of points. It could be at a physical port. It could be in the financial system. It could be in a lot of different ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you got pretty steeped in that. How many years were you doing it as a program manager?
So I was a program manager, like an SSA, for about 2 years. And then I went to the agency for a couple of years, officially like a 2-year detail, a little bit of extra overlap on either side. And then back to headquarters as the chief of the Iran program for like the next 4 or 5 years until I left headquarters. Yeah. Well, I kind of enjoyed my headquarters time. I was doing what I felt was some meaningful and some fun stuff. Kind of creating some new programs as well that, I believe still live to this day that, we're using to interdict and thwart things. So I sort of enjoyed it. That was, to me, that was a good time. Obviously, the bureaucracy of it was a disaster, and the way that headquarters was run is an absolute disaster and train wreck.
What state or district did you live in during your headquarters time?
I lived in Virginia. Yeah, Fairfax County. Yep. And so I was I was on the train every day. I came in. Yeah.
Yeah. So you lived in the Americas, and I think that delineates the different types of people that go to headquarters, because I can only be friends with people that lived in Virginia.
Yeah, not the Maryland folks.
I just don't get it.
Yeah.
Because Virginia's right there.
Right.
You could live there. You can own a gun and it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
Nope.
Although not in New Jersey, you couldn't own a gun.
Right. Yeah. So you moved from America to a slightly more America, even though it's not very American.
That's right.
In some ways.
That's right.
Okay. Let's set up your, last little question on that too. What was your interaction with the field agents? Because I know it's a mixed bag when it comes to program managers and their interaction. My buddy Steve Friend regularly talks about someone taps in for 18 months, puts their name on a memo, doesn't help anything, doesn't understand the program. What was your dynamic, and did that change at all during your time there as you got more senior in it? And how'd you interact with the field?
It depends on who you ask, I think.
Yeah, of course.
As a field agent working CI or anything, like, I hated headquarters. They were a bunch of idiots who did nothing to help your case and were just obstacles, administrative burdens. I hated those program managers, as they're called there. And then I went and became one. But in some ways that was maybe helpful, because like I tried to swear to myself, I will never be like those people. Like, my personal position was, I'm here to assist you, the case agent, not run your case or tell you what or how to do it necessarily. I'm going to try to help you and add value to it in any way that I possibly could. I'm going to try to make your life easier. You had to get headquarters approvals to do all kinds of things. I mean, as a field case agent, especially on national security stuff, you need headquarters approval. If you want to travel somewhere, you got to get headquarters approval. If you want to do this or that, you got to get headquarters approval. So my job, I felt, was to make it as easy as possible. Now, having said that, like, when you work those national security things, you really are working in the interagency. This is no longer like partnering on a VICMO bank robbery with like the local sheriff. If you have a big case on like a counterproliferation, like I was working, not only are you working with almost certainly the CIA and other 3-letter agencies, but you might be working with Mossad, you might be working with Germans, you might be working with the British. And those are all people with real stakes and equities that, Jim, the case agent in Omaha, just can't like dictate terms to the entire international community on how his case is going to run. And that's where I felt like it was the most challenging to get everybody synchronized. I mean, you really have to be a diplomat to get everybody singing on the same page. And so I am certain that there were a lot of folks that probably didn't like me in the field because of having to coordinate these things. There were others that liked me a lot that were like, hey, thanks for helping me coordinate with, Mossad or whoever.
Sure. Well, the reason I bring that up is because I've had people who retired, and it is a unique experience to spend enough time at headquarters to understand it. And almost to a man, the folks that I respect that worked in the Bureau and retired said, if you really want to understand what the FBI is, you have to go to headquarters. You have to spend time there, because you've got to see it from the side that you just explained, and I've never heard it explained quite that way.
Yeah.
And that's where the other equities come in.
It might be true. Like I obviously have heard that, and people, criticize that philosophy coming from a headquarters guy. And it's probably not necessary on the strictly criminal stuff. I don't know. I guess I can't say that, but on the national security stuff, when there are so many stakeholders, it really is like imperative to know and be able to coordinate this. And you don't operate in a vacuum. And then there's certain field offices, right, that are particularly like, this is my investigation, screw you and screw everybody else. I'm going to do it my way. Like,
we're totally not talking about New York field office right there.
Right. Exactly. It's so true.
You were being really gentle about that.
I was
but
trying
I don't have to be.
because I respect the work that they did. The folks in New York on like this program, best cases they had. Oh my gosh. I can't sing their praises enough. And I know some of them were very upset with me at various points, but to their credit, they had the most impactful, best work, and they were phenomenal. Notwithstanding the gear grinding of trying to coordinate things and get things to work out the way that they ought to be. But
that perspective and the headquarters side of it and the working on the agency side, I think that does give the bona fides to talk about the first whistleblower activity. I got a little cheat sheet because I got to listen to you talk to Chris Farrell about it.
Okay.
So I have kind of a sense of what that was, but it even makes more sense because I didn't hear you talk about that background and the international interplay of all the other, IC partners in the world. You want to set up and then walk us through your first whistleblower activity, and we'll get into consequences of what that looks like.
Yeah, sure. So I come back from CIA, and of course, like even at that time, there was the negotiations for the nuclear deal. But around 2013 is when those negotiations really started getting serious and heating up. And so you had John Kerry was the Secretary of State at the time. And our investigations are in that space around counterproliferation in particular are multi-year, multi-agency, multi-nation, in many cases, investigations. And so what happens in 2013, 2014, when they're desperate for any agreement with Iran, they start interfering with law enforcement, not just FBI, Department of Commerce, DHS, other investigations, but obviously I'll just speak to the FBI side of things. We had a lot of arrest warrants and indictments pending, and some of these people, many of them are international figures and they don't travel often. We use extradition as a tool quite a bit, and try to get them maybe lured to a country that's favorable for extradition.
You want to talk about what the process is for pause and the State Department involvement there, since you brought up Kerry?
Yeah. So when you get, we would get an indictment on your Iranian bad guy who travels a lot. Maybe he's in Iran, but travels internationally, probably never to the United States. And, then there's this thing where with Interpol, you could put a red notice in, which like alerts the system. Well, we generally would not put red notices in because there's a good chance that would leak that we were interested, and then they would never travel. So, basically what we did on the intelligence side is we would wait and have good visibility on their travel plans. And if we saw them traveling, we would start spinning up our coordination, and we would then, while they're like in flight, get a provisional arrest warrant, a pause, you described it, and then send that provisional arrest warrant to the country that they're about to land in or just landed in or traveling in, and saying, hey, we want to arrest them and we pledge to extradite them, and here's the charges that they're on. And we had to, pick that very carefully because only certain countries, every country had different rules. And even the countries that had favorable rules didn't always have the political will. And so we had to work very carefully with countries that both had the rules and the political will to extradite somebody back to us. And so they would land or whatever to do their meetings, and then they would be greeted by the local police who would take them into custody. And ultimately, it would usually take months and months, but ultimately extradite them to the United States. But they're very complex and difficult to pull off things. And so the interference comes from State Department. Anytime that there was any sort of law enforcement type thing against the Iranians, like clockwork, the Iranians, meaning like the foreign minister, Javad Zarif, or his deputy, would be on the phone with John Kerry complaining and like, hey, what are you trying to do? And, you're trying to derail these negotiations. You've got to let this guy go. You can't do that. And in their earnest to get this agreement, the State Department was like, oh, yeah, sure, we'll do whatever you want us to do. And so State Department and DOJ formed this, I call it a working group. Actually, I call it the Star Chamber. Like there were a small group of people that would get together and give like this thumbs up or thumbs down whether we could arrest somebody. Now, this is something where we've investigated for 5-10 years, maybe. And we went to a U.S. attorney. The U.S. attorney agreed to prosecute. The U.S. attorney took it to a grand jury. The U.S. attorney got an arrest warrant and an indictment signed by a judge. And now we're trying to execute that arrest warrant. And somebody at State Department, like in some cases, specifically John Kerry, was stepping in and saying, no, you can't do that. Like, this is not prosecutorial discretion here. Prosecutorial discretion is when, you're like, with the AUSA, I don't really think we have enough here. It doesn't meet a threshold, blah, blah, blah. We better not take it to the grand jury. That's prosecutorial discretion. And I might not always agree with it, but that's just the way it goes. This is, you've got a warrant. And the guy, in some cases, like we had one guy that landed in the United States. He was on a terrorist watch list. He was part of their nuclear program. We got him here and we're about to arrest him. And as he was landing, they said, no, you're not allowed to arrest him. Send him back. We're like, what are you talking about? This is like a major figure in Iran's program. The amount of intelligence that we would have gotten from debriefing, looking at his electronics and things like that he had with him would have informed on the very deal that they're negotiating. But they don't want it. Not to mention taking a very important person out of the equation. They insisted, and they made us break all kinds of rules. You need to remove him from NCIC right now and everything. And DHS and CBP are looking at us like, well, what kind of idiots are you? I have an active warrant in NCIC here. We have to arrest them. And it was just a complete show. And
they let him go?
Huh?
Did they let him go?
Absolutely. They let him go. And actually, it's part of that specific instance was an example I used in my protected disclosure of 2015. I had made a protected disclosure in July of 2015 directly to Director Comey. And so in 2015, as they formed an agreement with Iran, the U.S. Congress passed a law called the Iran Nuclear Agreement Review Act of 2015. And in it, it specifically prohibited during the review period of the negotiated deal, it specifically prohibited any type of sanctions relief or any help or assistance, Section B3 for your people out there that want to check. And
there will be some.
I know, and that's why I throw it out there. And by virtue of interfering with these lawful arrest warrants, they were providing sanctions relief to Iran, allowing them to not be arrested and giving them this reprieve. And so I was like, look, I might not have liked the previous policy of the U.S., but I didn't necessarily know or think it was a violation of law, the standard basically for whistleblower disclosure. But when I saw that they were violating this new statute at the time, I was like, I can't sit idly anymore. And I took it to two of our attorneys at FBI and NSLB and said, hey, can you guys give me your opinion to the interference effort, the interference that we've seen from State Department, FBI itself, and DOJ? Does that constitute a violation of this federal act? Can you look at it? They're like, sure, we'll be happy to look at it. They emailed me back, and I posted this on my account too. They emailed me back, said, yeah, we think it did. Would you like us to, I was like, can you put it in writing? They're like, yeah, would it like a blurb on email be sufficient? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. They're like, do you want us to add that it's based on political factors and political interference? I'm like, no, you don't need to do that. I'll let the chips fall where they may. Just,
Mhm.
that it violates the statute. And they're like, sure. Next day, I get a phone call. The attorney's got a phone call saying, you're not putting anything in writing. And they were shut down. And I have that on email, which I posted on my
Right.
account too. So complete corruption.
NSLB, National
Security Law
Security Legal Branch or Law Branch. And so these are attorneys inside the FBI that their entire job is interpreting national security matters of federal law. Yes,
Correct. That's right.
they're legit. Like that's their expertise.
And that's
Mhm.
exactly what they did. And I asked them to do just that. And they knew, we worked with them before. They knew what had been going on with these cases. And I simply asked them, hey, the things that I documented here, can you look against this law here that was passed and tell me if you think that this law was violated? And they said yes. And they were willing to put it in writing until management shut them down.
And that's actually why that branch exists. You go out there and query them with specific things. You go, here's a circumstance, here's a tactic I want to use, here's here's an operation I'd like to run. Can we validate that this thing is something I can legally do and that I can ethically do and that we can, we had a deal where we had a guy who escaped on a UFAP
Mhm.
from New Mexico, and he had been accused, and then he was indicted for sexually assaulting. It's more graphic than that, but let's just leave it nicely. A handful of young girls, and he was old. He was in his 70s, late 70s, and his family members helped him escape to the other side of the country, to the other side of the border. So he went to Mexico, and he was hanging out there. And the international unit ended up locating him, finding him, knew what was going on. And so I ran this idea. I said, look, he's got Social Security coming in. The United States is paying this man, and he's a fugitive from justice. We can shut that down. So we did. And then we found that the footage showed that his daughter had involved herself in getting him across the border. And she was living in the United States. And I said, why don't we make a phone call to the number that we have on record and state to him in no uncertain terms that you can surrender yourself, or we're going to go after your daughter for accessory. And here's the statute that I want to do. Can you interpret whether this plays? And are we violating anything by asking a man in Mexico whose phone number we have to turn himself in at the Bridge of the Americas at a certain time, in a week, or we're going to go and make sure that we get the daughter, and we should probably get the daughter anyway, because that's the right thing to do. So we kind of laid out the plan, and, same kind of deal. They look at it and they go, okay, well, this is where you would run afoul, or here's how you'd have to word your language. And this is what your op plan has to look like. But that's what these guys exist for.
Yeah. Give you the
Your job is-
parameters to make sure you're doing it right. I mean, a lot of
Right.
us are type A personalities, right? And we come up with sometimes maybe even some crazy ideas. They're supposed to be.
That might be a crazy idea I just
Yeah,
laid out,
we're
by the way, but I don't think it's a bad one.
No. And they're supposed to be the backstop to make sure that, we're not doing anything crazy. And sometimes it works. And sometimes in this case,
That's right. That guy's still in Mexico, as far as I
yeah,
know.
probably. Yeah.
Yeah,
He's probably
they shut me
watching you,
down.
laughing at you.
Hopefully so.
Yeah.
And that's just the reward. But end of the day, all you're trying to do, and they asked you for politics. Did they know what your politics were? These people, do they know you personally?
Yeah. I mean, you know them. Headquarters is a big social club and whatnot. So
Mhm.
you go out drinking with them and stuff. I mean, you certainly get a sense maybe, but that's sort of the weird thing. Like when you look at like the politicization of the FBI, I didn't really feel or notice any politicization until like 2015. Like that was the first time that I really started to see and feel politically motivated things happening. And like I can remember, so New Jersey, where I came from as an agent, like that's a liberal place. And frankly, a lot of the agents there, were more liberal and Democrats. But yet on the squad, my OSADEF squad, you could sit there and talk about, your liberal or Democratic views, and I could talk about a conservative view, and it doesn't matter. Like you're still going through the door at the same time. You still trust each other with your lives. Things changed in 2015 and moving forward. And I frankly attribute that to Comey. I mean, it really became politicized, and it didn't change. It got worse under Ray, in my opinion. And
do you have a sense of do you have a sense of the mechanism that Comey would have used that caused that?
I would say hiring is probably a factor that that inculcated it in the lower ranks, right? When you purposefully, I mean, we're talking about like the quote unquote DEI hiring, for example. When you
I'm hearing personnel is policy. I'm just going to say that for the audience.
Personnel is in fact
Okay.
policy, and it's long-lived policy as well. Because as you know, a government employee is very difficult to, well, I was going to.
Have you heard the term 20-year mistake? Have you heard that term in the Bureau?
Yeah. And it's true. Like I unfortunately had to work to get a couple of people removed at one point, and it is next to impossible. And so like, I personally like understand why managers in the FBI just throw their hands up. Like, I can't do anything. Legitimately, people that need to go, you can't get rid of them. And then
send them to SOG where they can screw up a whole team instead of screwing up one person's desk.
But if you're a whistleblower, man, they will find a way to get rid of you in a heartbeat. Suddenly they can find a way. Yeah.
Well, let's do consequences. What method did you get your whistleblower disclosure, your protected disclosure to Comey? You said you took it to him directly. So what was that route?
I literally emailed it to him. So I got this thing back from the attorneys saying, yeah, we'll put it in writing, yada, yada. And then I talked to them and they're like, no, we can't put it in writing. I'm like, that's it. I'm done. I immediately sat down and started writing my protected disclosure. And I think it was like a Thursday night at like 7 o'clock or something. I sent the email. It was an email directly to James Comey. And
how did you formulate this disclosure? Because as you mentioned, there are parameters that have to be fit for it to be quote unquote protected.
Yep. Yeah. So I being an agent, a case agent, I try to think in terms of like proving a case, like an agent, like collecting evidence, demonstrating evidence. And so like in all of my whistleblowing, I have always tried to tie whatever my complaint is to a specific, and I articulated what the fact, what the statute is that's been violated, or what the policy. It's not that I'm just like making up some allegation that I didn't like or didn't agree with, and then also providing the evidence to support and show that this was broken. So that's sort of what I did. I laid out in my protected disclosure, the headline of it, the title of the email was Whistleblower Protected Disclosure, to make it, blank and, be crystal clear what this was and not be ambiguous about it. And then, I tried to acknowledge in the beginning, I understand the greater policy posture of the United States, et cetera, et cetera. However, these are the laws that were broken, specifically this law. These were the policies that were broken, and here's examples illustrating that. And I tried to keep it short. I think it was, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 pages, 3 pages or something. But I laid out specific examples showing some very damning and significant things where people like John Kerry himself were interfering with lawful FBI and other agency arrest warrants and wielding power arbitrarily that they didn't have.
And it sounds like you were not rewarded with an on-the-spot award for doing a great job. So what happens next?
Surprisingly, Comey responded to me. He sent an email back on, I believe, Sunday night or Sunday. I don't know if it was night or not. Unfortunately, his response was really completely dismissive. And, I talked about that prosecutorial discretion. He chalked everything up to prosecutorial discretion. He kind of missed the point that these people had already been indicted in some cases years and years ago. And the whole influence, and people can read my protected disclosure online now because I posted it to X. There's some pretty serious things like the personal financial enrichment of Foreign Minister Javad Zarif in one case. So those things were done with Kerry's knowledge and approval. That's corruption. There's no two ways about it. It's corruption. And if I could tell the classified story, man, it would make it all that much clearer too. I wish I could. So he dismissed it, said, hey, we'll send it over to Inspection Division. They sent it over to Inspection Division. Frankly, I thought it would be investigated. I was very surprised when I got a letter, 6 weeks later, which I also posted, saying, we're not going to investigate it. I was like, what? I documented a violation of a specific law that Congress just passed.
Was that the first time that you kind of did a double take at, or had a kind of a real serious gut check on the Bureau?
That was the eye opener for me. I mean, because I went into it like this was a serious matter. I didn't undertake this lightly. And in fact, I told all of my employees in my unit, like, hey, I'm doing this. And I showed them my protected disclosure before I submitted it. I think it was before, maybe it was just after. and said, hey, look, I'm not asking anybody to sign on to this. I know you all are disappointed and upset with the same shenanigans that I am, but I'm just showing this to you. I might not be here, next week
Yeah,
or something.
how was that received by folks around you?
Actually, it's my understanding that at least 2 other employees wrote their own protected disclosures, echoing the same things that I did in my protected disclosure, and got the same similar, thanks but no thanks. We're not investigating it. We're not going to look into it. But I don't know. I felt like I needed to be, transparent with them and let them know what I was doing, and it was up to them if they wanted to jump in on it or not. It was interesting because some were like, no, they were clearly afraid of the consequences of saying something, even though they shared the same belief.
Yeah, even though they get that annual whistleblower training. That's weird. Why do they?
Yeah, that far.
What's that training do?
Yeah.
There's a culture moment I want to dig into, and it's unique, I think, at least to our maybe common experience. But if you haven't had that moment, the gut check, the eye open, the unexpected consequence of something that you thought you were doing you thought you were probably being trained for that moment, were you not? I don't want to put words in your mouth, but
I didn't.
I feel like I've heard you say that.
I did not think or feel that retaliation was headed my way. I had a little quirk on the video. I didn't know if it.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
You didn't think. Okay, you were saying that you didn't think or feel.
Yeah, I didn't think or feel that I would have any retaliation per se. I mean, like you said, we get annual training about it. I took it very seriously. I consulted attorneys ahead of time, like FBI attorneys, to make sure I wasn't like some lunatic in left field with this. And I was just shocked. Like I didn't put everything in my protected disclosure. Because A, I was trying to keep it short, and then B, I was like, well, they're going to open an investigation, and I'll tell them the other stuff then, that I have. And I get this email back saying we're not going to investigate. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, and by the way, like, ding, 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 these other 2 or 3 things to inspection division unit chief, and asking him if OIG had seen it, and he said, yep, OIG saw it, and they declined it on such and such date, and so good luck, and that was it. I mean. I got, yelled at by, the assistant director pretty good. And I think, I didn't really have career ambitions beyond my current position at that point. So like, I know my career was over at that point, but I didn't, I wasn't aspiring to anything further. It was, I guess, kind of funny too, because not long after this, like my boss pulls me into his office. My boss was section chief. He's like, and I didn't have field desk. I wasn't a field supervisor previously at this point. So I was a GS-15 unit chief, but I had not been a field supervisor, just a headquarters supervisor. And if you're progressing through your career, you have to do 2 years as a field supervisor to check that box to go up in your career. So my boss pulls me in and is like, hey, Bill, there's going to be a desk coming open at WFO. And I know you don't have your field experience yet. I think you might want to think about taking that. And like, I was the problem that they needed to get rid of. So they were willing to like direct place me in a field supervisory position to get me out of the unit chief position at headquarters, who just, became a whistleblower. They would have done and tried to do anything to get rid of me if they could. But I was like, I'm happy where I'm at. This is good, for now until, I decide it's time to leave, But in their mentality, though, they don't get it because they're there for 18 to 24 months max. And that was one of my biggest complaints about headquarters. I mentioned what it, joke a lot of it is these managers, particularly at the lower SES levels, like section chiefs, would rotate through. And so like they would get there. It would take them 6 months to learn what they were doing. They might contribute for 6 months. And then their last 6 months is figuring out where they're going next. And, they don't know or care about the program. Like I had countless section chiefs, bosses that had no clue about counterproliferation. Some of them didn't even know anything about counterintelligence hardly, but yet and it's so embarrassing because you go to other agencies and you introduce your boss, like this SES section chief, and they expect them to know something. Like I bring them over to CIA and things like that to meet with people, and they're just like empty suits. And it's honestly embarrassing that they have no knowledge or background. They're just there punching a ticket to get to their next position. and they're never there long enough to contribute. And I promised myself, I'm not going to be one of those people. Like, I'm not going to punch a ticket for two years just so I can get another position. I want to contribute something. And so that's why, I know people laugh, like, what kind of an idiot are you to be at headquarters for 7 or 8 years and, a unit chief for like 4 or 5 years? That's why, like, I didn't want to, be that guy who just turns it over. I wanted to try to contribute meaningfully and know what I was working too. I mean,
yeah. Well, that sounds like you're not one of us, if I had to guess, just based on the way these people work. One of the things that a friend of mine, George Hill, has talked about, he's, we deal with him on Twitter too, but George and I talk all the time. And he mentioned the difference between what the FBI considers to be a SME, a subject matter expert, and what the intelligence community considers to be a SME. And so when you go and you bring your FBI SES boss who's got 6 months on the job and knows nothing about your threat, and then you go meet with a real subject matter expert who spent 20 years studying the ins and outs and intricacies. We just had that on the bombing of the nuclear facility in Iran very recently, where you heard about guys that spent 15 years and every single day they woke up and they thought about and they worked and they went to sleep thinking about the same individual singular threat.
Yep.
And they knew the atmospherics and they knew the altitudes and they knew the GPS coordinates of every possible entry. And they knew the progression of technologies and the movements in, and they could tell you the number of trucks on a Wednesday on average, kind of like that was all they did.
And that's real deal too. Like, I met in my time at CIA, a lot of those types of people, those highly specialized, spend years on a specific thing, a specific widget even.
Mm-hmm.
It would come as no surprise, right? That CIA uses covert action authorities that it has from the president to do sort of like the really cool secret shady stuff. And to do that, you need that level of understanding of things. And I saw that's why I say, like, that was very impressive. Like, these people are dedicated patriots that, like, literally devote years to the most minute things to make sure that large effects that benefit our country happen later. Like, that's why it's just so embarrassing to bring our quote unquote subject matter experts over to talk to their subject matter experts sometimes.
Right. Theirs is like a weaponized autistic person in their 40s who's been studying it their whole adult life. And we bring over like a 26-year-old female analyst who got assigned to it randomly after having a background that was unrelated.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And you're just like,
she was an intern, 6 months ago and maybe had, some experience in a service industry. I don't know.
That sounds super familiar.
Yeah.
And all right. Here's what I also want to key in on, because this is a bureau culture thing that people won't get anywhere else. Did you ever see somebody go up against the bureau in the, how many years was it before? 2003 to what? 2015? 12 years?
Yeah.
Guess?
Yeah, probably. Right. Yeah.
Did you see anybody go up against the bureau in that time? And if so, what did you think about the results?
I'm just trying to think. It's an excellent question. Like, I'm trying to remember any specific instance, like, go up against, not as a whistleblower. Like, I never heard of it.
Yeah, but like, someone who was said, hey, we got a problem here, whether it be a specific whistleblower where they actually took it to a Comey, but theoretically saying we're violating rule, policy, or law, somebody was a stickler for sort of like doing things the right way, or maybe said, hey, this is an improper way of doing it. Anybody who was kind of the squeaky wheel for policy or for what would later be looked at as being like, hey, you probably have a different perspective on them today, but did you see anybody go up against the bureau and kind of push back and say, hey, we got a problem here in those 12 years?
I'm trying to think of an example, and I'm sure if I thought long enough, I could probably think of one, but the only thing that really comes to mind is just in general terms, like, we sort of policed our own in a sense. Like, I'm thinking back to the drug squad, and like when guys screwed up or did something, not right, like, we had a senior guy on the squad that would talk to you and say, hey man, like, you can't do that. You can't press the barrel of your gun against that guy's head when he's on the ground. I literally saw that happen. Yeah. Yeah. We're arresting a drug guy and I have him on the ground and another agent comes up and presses the barrel of his Glock into the side of the guy's head and says, don't move or I'll shoot you, MFer. And after that, we always would do like a hot wash after to see how things went. And that was definitely an issue that came up that's like, that's no bueno. Don't do that. No.
That's tactically bad.
Exactly. There's so many things wrong with that. It was just like, what are you doing? But like a lot of the things that your question it just seemed like we remedied ourselves, whether it was on that squad or even maybe to a lesser degree on the CI squad when I was on it, but I don't remember like a policy thing that it was escalated up the chain so much.
Do you ever see the OPR quarterlies?
Oh yeah, those are fun.
Can you describe what those are for folks who are not FBI people or nerds?
Yeah, we would wait for these things to come out. Like
it's a whole morning.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're like, I never want to be that guy or whatever. That's. Can you believe that? So what they are is an OPR is an internal investigation on an employee, and to make to try to maybe inform the employee base. They published this OPR quarterly, which highlights some of the cases that internal investigations adjudicated. And they have a very scripted kind of format with these things. They lay out some brief facts of the case, and then they'll tell you what the discipline may have been with it, whether, there's these things called aggravators and mitigators. Like there's a standard penalty for something. And then like in mitigation, you were highly decorated in the past or something. Or in aggravation, you were like a real big idiot, and so we're going to hit you harder. And so, we would always wait for those things because usually it always featured a lot of very poor judgment, like, agents abusing the view car in various ways.
Like going to strip clubs in the workday, or
exactly, or
taking their stripper source home.
Yeah.
To avoid their wife or something. I don't know how many of those were there.
Always these funny things.
But listen, in mitigation, he was a really good, and he was a Cub Scout leader and father of 4 children. But in aggravation, he was also known for drinking on the job and had previously wrapped his Buick car around a telephone pole and got away. Right? There you go.
But something about that's frustrating. I think they just do it for a self-serving purpose to show the employees that they actually take action against misconduct. But here's a story. So I'm in Newark as a fairly new agent, but there's a new agent that comes in even newer than me. He's on probation, and I come into work one day and find out that he was arrested for drunk driving. He was driving the wrong way on the Pennsylvania Turnpike at night, and I think it was his Buick car. I'm not 100% sure it was Buick car, but he got arrested for DUI. In my mind, he's a probationary agent. That's it. He's fired. Like, you're done. Like, there is no, mitigating factors there. They didn't fire him. I was shocked. So what happens is he goes for his trial on his DUI, and the cop doesn't show up to be a witness. So what happens? Dismissed, of course. They did him a favor, right? Now, I don't know if anybody arranged that favor or not, but charge was dropped. And so here's a guy that had a DUI. He spends another maybe year or two in Newark, and then he gets transferred to DC, or takes a transfer, puts in for it, to the AG protective detail.
Smart.
I don't even think he reported for duty. Within maybe a week or two of him arriving, he once again is drunk driving on the roads in Maryland. And this time his drunk driving results in the vehicular homicide of a teenager and the serious injury of the passenger. If he was properly prosecuted and or terminated, like everybody believes he should have been and could have been, maybe that kid would still be alive. An 18-year-old kid lost his life because the FBI failed to do what it should have done and hold people accountable. It resulted in a kid losing his life to a drunk driver, a person that they know the FBI knew had a problem with drunk driving. It's indefensible. It's inexcusable.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And then you also probably have a slightly different perspective after your life now, looking back at some of these OPRs and the way that they're drafted and the charges on them. And when you've seen what they're willing to put in an OPR file, it probably changes the game a little bit about how you look at those things and whether or not they were being particularly truthful.
It makes it even worse because I now know, not only from personal experience, but from other people sharing their personal experiences, the FBI is more than willing to fabricate and exaggerate allegations against somebody in an OPR investigation against them if they just don't like you. But yet at the same time, they won't legitimately hold people accountable that clearly, should be held accountable. They wield it simply as a tool. The two tiers of justice that we see in society is alive and well inside the FBI, unfortunately.
I just got a text message before we decided to start recording. A friend of mine who's been watching a case that's out of Montana, and it was the SSRA. So what do they call that? Is that supervisory senior, or is it, what is it?
Supervisory resident agent, senior supervisory special resident agent. I think I always get it mixed up. SSRA. That's the head guy in the RA above the other SSAs even, but still the same pay grade, but he's technically the head of that office.
So as I recall, he was out of Helena, Montana. I'll post the story over on X so people can find it because it's worth reading. NBC covered it. But he was arrested by the state police for stalking an ex. And I don't know if it was a girlfriend or a wife. The details escape me right now. I saw the headline and I knew the story already a little bit. He'd been arrested for stalking. There was a protective order that was put in place by this female that this guy was doing dangerous and predatory stuff. And, you're arrested by one of your quote unquote state and local partners, right? People you got to have a good relationship with. And he was out on bail and waiting for trial. So the FBI let him stay in his job as a GS-14 supervisor of the FBI on a domestic violence stalking charge, a woman who feared for her life. And he was able to continue all the way until the outcome of the trial is irrelevant because he was able to retire from the Bureau while under investigation for a violent and dangerous thing. And I think there was some physical violence that was involved previously. So I'll get the whole story out for people to hear it. But, that kind of stuff, kill a teenager, run down your ex-wife and scare the hell out of her in her house and make her live in fear of her life because you're an FBI agent who still carries a badge and a gun.
Yeah. People have referred to this mafia thing, and it really is an apt descriptor for them. They act like a mafia would. They have this unrighteous system of carrying out, retaliation and retribution against people and ignoring things that clearly should be punished. I posted recently about perjury in a J6 case. I have the receipts, like I have the testimony transcript. I have an audio recording of his comments. It's dead to rights, but yet nothing, zero, no accountability whatsoever. It's bad news.
I want to tease people and do a part 2 of this. We'll continue recording right now. But what I want to, can you give me a summary of kind of some high points to some of the salacious details we're going to have to get into to carry out the rest of your story now that you had your eyes opened and Jim Comey decided that it didn't matter whether or not somebody was violating federal law?
Yeah. So I do my protected disclosure in 2015, whatever sort of insignificant retaliation, I never complained about it type of a thing. And I'm going on with my career. And then in 2018, I'm taking my off ramp, if you will, getting out to the field to where I want to retire. And I end up in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I come here in 2018 and, I've got like 6-7 years to go, going to finish out my career here as a supervisory special agent. And I had no expectation of being a whistleblower or anything. And then suddenly a lot of bad things happened in the last couple of years that, again, like I just couldn't turn a blind eye to. Like I wasn't going to allow violations of the Constitution. I wasn't going to allow people to fabricate predication of investigations and just kind of go along with it. And I am surprised that everybody else was willing to go along with it. It still doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. People just think differently, I guess. There's two ways of people thinking. There's people who, I like to say, I took an oath to the Constitution, not the institution of the FBI. I think a lot of people take an oath to the institution of the FBI, which is the source of a lot of our problems.
That's going to conclude our part 1 right there. It's Bill Taylor. You can find him on X. It's at RET FBI, like retired FBI, RET FBI. Check out Bill's commentary on there. If you're looking for documents, they are all there. He is a gifted writer, and I think he says a lot of things that you should hear from another voice than my own, and you should hear from another voice than some of the other whistleblowers you've heard. He's got a small enough platform that you're going to see. It's not biased. It's just what the man sees, and I think it will resonate. We don't have to agree on everything, but I think we're going to agree on a lot of the main stuff. And then check in for round 2 of this, because we're going to do it a little bit further where we get into what actually ends up being, I think, probably the nastiest thing, including all the, was some death threats involved in the next round of this?
Yeah,
one?
I mean, we can get into death threats, assassination lists. We can get into J6 related stuff like that, and the retaliation from the FBI.
We're going to do all that.
We
so
should do
let's
that.
make that part 2.
It's worth bringing out.
And that is the Sunday Sit Down with Bill Taylor. Round 1, part 1. You guys are going to have to like, share, and subscribe it if you want to get to part 2. I'm just saying, put it out there. This one is sponsored by our folks over on Locals. If you guys want to hear a little teaser of part 2, we have FBI agents committing perjury on the stand. We've got street fights that turn into domestic terrorism charges. And we have a hit list of 35 FBI employees and some real wild stuff going on with J6ers. So, guys, make sure you guys listen to this mostly so you have an understanding that it's just not me out there telling this stuff. And you can support us and sponsor this program yourselves by joining us over on Locals. It's KyleSerafin.com. If you want to be part of our Locals channel, you can follow us on Rumble at rumble.com/Kyle Serafin. It's X at Kyle Serafin, YouTube.com/Kyle Serafin. All these things real easy to do. Check us out over there, and make sure you've liked this video. If you sat through it to this point and you're not liking it, what the heck are you doing over there? Bump us up in the ratings, let people know about it, share it with a friend. KyleSerafinshow.com if you want to get it on Spotify, and you can watch or listen as you like. Really appreciate all of you guys joining me, and I look forward for you seeing us on Tuesday, and then also catch in part 2 next Sunday. So make sure you guys put this stuff on your calendar, or at least work it into your schedule. See you very soon.
Thank you for listening to The Kyle Serafin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Serafin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Serafin.